Having well-developed shoulders helps your physique stand out. 3D delts makes your upper body look more muscular and waist look slimmer, which is a common goal of many people. But when it comes to shoulder training, there are some commonly made mistakes that can slow down your progress. In today's video, I will discuss 4 common shoulder training mistakes and how you can fix them. I will also show you how to have a balanced shoulder training routine so that you can effectively work on developing your delts. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to this channel. Your support helps me grow the channel further and reach more people, and I would also really appreciate it. And let's dive into the video by discussing shoulder anatomy. The shoulder has 3 heads: the front, side, and rear deltoid. The front deltoid is involved in shoulder flexion, which happens when you raise your arm up. The side deltoid is involved in vertical shoulder abduction. This happens when you raise your arms to the side. And lastly, the rear deltoid is involved in horizontal shoulder abduction. This occurs when you move your arms away from your midline horizontally. To develop the shoulders in a balanced way, we want to make sure that we train all 3 heads and functions of the shoulder. And this also brings us to the first commonly made mistake when it comes to shoulder training, and that is only relying on a shoulder press to develop your shoulders. It is common for people to focus just on shoulder pressing in the hopes of growing their shoulders. The shoulder press is a great exercise that most people can benefit from doing, but based on the research, we do see that a shoulder press is front deltoid dominant. This makes sense. A shoulder press trains shoulder flexion, which is the function of your front deltoids. With shoulder press variations like the Arnold press, there is some slight shoulder abduction that could help train the side delts as well, but it still is mostly a front delt exercise. Let's take a typical shoulder-focused training session. Instead of doing something like a barbell shoulder press, Arnold press, and seated press, aim to do something like a shoulder press, side raise, and rear delt fly. This results in more balanced shoulder development. We want to prevent a clear bias to the front deltoids, since having overdeveloped front delts can contribute to a rounded forward posture. In combination with all the sitting that most people are doing now while working from home, paying more attention to the side and rear delts for balanced shoulder development makes sense. The second mistake is related to the first mistake, and that is that once people have trained the shoulder press, they also feel the need to add front raises into their training program. Front raises isolate the shoulder flexion function of the front deltoids. But as we just saw, the shoulder press already places a lot of emphasis on this front deltoid, not to mention that there are other push exercises you probably have in your training that also target the front delts. Whenever you perform an exercise like the flat bench press, incline bench press, and dips, you also train some shoulder flexion. So instead of allocating your isolation shoulder volume towards front raises, it makes more sense to allocate this volume towards side and rear delt flies. The side and rear delts are also the muscles that are mostly responsible for the 3D muscular look of your shoulders. Now that we know it's good to not just focus on the shoulder press and front raises, but to also include side and rear delt flies, let's look into a common mistake made when it comes to the side delt raise. Because if not performed properly, a side delt raise can actually be more focused on the front delts than your side delts. A basic rule in training is that the resistance needs to be in direct alignment with the muscle fibers you are trying to target. When you stand completely upright and do side raises, the resistance for a large part runs in line with your front deltoids. By leaning forward, the resistance runs more in line with your side delts. So when you do side delt raises, bend forward just slightly. You don't need to bend over a lot. A 70 to 75 degrees torso angle is a good rule of thumb. The same goes for cable side raises. Instead of standing completely upright, bend forward slightly. The fourth and last common mistake is a detail compared to the previously mentioned mistakes, but it's still worth mentioning, and that is not turning your rear delt flies into an upper back exercise. It is common for people to focus on protracting and retracting the scapula during rear delt flies, but we actually want little movement in your shoulder blades while performing the rear delt fly to prevent the strong upper back muscles from taking over. Now don't get me wrong, during exercises like barbell rows, scapular movement is great and helps you target the upper back muscles more effectively. But if we want to place specific focus on the rear deltoids, then it makes sense to have less scapular movement during a rear delt fly. This again also holds true with cable flies. Some movement at the shoulder blades is okay, but we don't want to turn it into an upper back movement. If you are struggling with rear delt development, then give this tip a try and you'll know the significant benefits. Now that we know the 4 common shoulder training mistakes, let's look into what shoulder training modality you should be using. Are cables or free weights more effective for developing your shoulders? Typically speaking, a combination of both is desired. For shoulder press variations, I would prefer dumbbell or barbell press variations, since pressing with a cable is typically a bit awkward. For side and rear delt flies, I am a fan of using cables. With cables, there's more constant resistance on exercises like a side delt raise. With cables, you are better able to train the shoulder throughout its range of motion. But if you only have dumbbells available, then doing dumbbell side and rear delt flies are still great options. You can even try something like 1.5 rep side raises if you don't have much weight at home but would like to make your side raises a good challenge. Lastly, an often overlooked muscle when it comes to shoulder training are your rotator cuffs, which are the 4 deep underlying shoulder muscles that play an important role in shoulder stabilization. The rotator cuffs are small, so developing them won't necessarily make your shoulders look more developed. But incorporating light internal and external rotation exercises into your warm-up is good to ensure the stabilizing muscles get strengthened as well. You can also incorporate face pulls as one of your rear delt exercises to train external rotation more actively in your workouts. This is great for when you want to improve a rounded forward posture. So to sum up this video, let's look into how you can incorporate all the principles discussed into your existing training program. First, don't rely on only shoulder presses or front raises to develop your shoulders. Next to doing the shoulder press, focus your shoulder isolation work on the side and rear deltoids. Also pay close attention to your side and rear delt raises form, since these are exercises in which details matter. A good upper body training program that trains the shoulders in a balanced way can look something like this. As you can see, we have a shoulder press, side raises, rear delt exercises, and an exercise that also targets the rotator cuffs. And that was all for today's video. I hope you now have a better understanding of how balanced shoulder training looks. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Also, give me a thumbs up if you found this video helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and I hope to see you in the next video.